So please turn off your cell phone if you have one.
Oh, quit.
It's very old-timey.
Just slam it to the ground.
You want to call the roll, Jennifer?
Normally we just call them.
Oh, go around and people can introduce themselves. And we'll start with Jordan.
Jordan Davis, tenant representative.
Gina Butta, nonprofit operator.
Bruce Burge, I'm a private operator.
Peter Keith, legal advisor.
Larry Kessler, Department of Public Health.
Diana Martinez, Mission SRO Collaborative.
Clifford Gilmore, Central Cities Collaborative.
Dan Jordan, tenant rep.
We have two new members of the housing inspection clerical team that are here to observe today.
My name's Michelle. I'm with the housing inspections.
And Trina Gomez.
And Trina, you used to work at the navigation centers.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and
Jennifer Chung-Ju, administrative support.
great. I already did myself.
Okay. All right.
Does anybody not know who I am? Okay. Let's see. Are there any suggestions for the minutes from the last meeting?
Peter Keith, legal advisor.
Yeah.
So, on the item of the SRO hotel visitor policy regarding sign-out rules and IDs, Clifford Gilmore called to my attention an objection on quorum issue. I reviewed the bylaws, and the bylaws, that matter, by the way, got a vote of 6 ayes and 3 nays, and the minutes recorded as the motion being adopted. However, under the bylaws, at least the existing version, which has not yet been amended, there has to be a majority of the entire task force. It's not just a majority of the members present. So there has to be a vote of 8 for a motion to carry under the current bylaws. And since that vote was less than 8, the motion did not carry.
Okay. So the minutes say the motion was adopted. Okay, so we need to amend that.
I say the vote on the motion was 6 ayes and 3 nays, so the motion did not carry.
Did not carry.
Also, I don't know if it's proper this time while we review the minutes, whether there's further comments on that item or not.
It's on the agenda later, so I
okay.
certainly
We'll
can
do
come
it
back
there.
to it. But I just wanted to say for the purpose of the minutes, that's not accurate, and so I just wanted to mention this, how the second look came about. And I think certainly it's wise to have it on the agenda.
Okay. We will revisit that. Any other comments on the minutes? All right. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
A motion to approve.
All right. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay. One opposed.
Who seconded?
Oh, did anyone, we need to have a second of the motion, sorry. Diana, you seconded the motion? Yeah. Okay. All right, so, let's see, that's the minutes. Bylaws. So, does anybody here know who Judy Boyajian is? Judy Boyajian is a legendary attorney at the city attorney's office who has worked on land use issues for decades, literally. And she's only part-time now, but I spent an hour with her going over these bylaws. There's been at least 2 or 3 attempts to bring these up to date that go back a couple of years, but they was never finished. That's one of the things that Rosemary asked me to do right before she left was make sure that I take all the advice that we've been getting over the last 2 years about the bylaws, put it all together, and this is what we came up with. So we're going to take a couple of minutes here and walk through these. Some parts are in red, and some parts are stricken. So the parts in red are things that we are adding. There's a sentence in section 2 that Judy asked us to put in to make sure that the bylaws reflect the purpose according to the ordinance that created the task force. So that's what this section is, section 2. The next section, we're formalizing how the city attorney is working with our group. If you go to the next page, just a couple of minor changes in some of the descriptive words here, and then we're also reflecting the new Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing. With attendance, we're taking out a sentence about unexcused absences. Just to clarify it, leave of absence, we're no longer going to have leave of absence. That was something that I think we did 10 years ago or something. So we didn't think that was useful anymore. The language here in section 7 is sort of redundant with another section. So we took out the first sentence there. Article 3, section 1 reflects the quorum, so that should help us. The minutes, as we've been doing, we're posting the audio recordings, but we're also making sure we keep minutes in accordance with all the proper codes. Section 6, regular meetings, keeping this, we're just clarifying this, but I may ask the group to come back and look at this in a couple of months, simply because this is meetings at the third Thursday. The third Wednesday of every month is our commission meets, and that's a whole, yesterday we had this gigantic appeal that's been going on for a long time, and it's difficult for Jennifer and I to do this stuff back to back, that thing yesterday and this thing today. So we won't, it's not on the calendar for today, but at some point down the road, I'm going to ask people to think of another date that we can meet. Special meetings, we're not using those anymore. Voting, we want to, and we are allowed to do this according to Judy, is just take a majority vote, and the majority vote will be able to make a decision and carry a motion rather than the 8 votes that the bylaws say. Votes may be taken by acclamation unless a member requests a roll call vote, which will cause the vote to be detailed in the minutes. So that simplifies that. And then the rest is just some minor stuff. Are there any comments on the bylaws? Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, just a couple things, because we're on a minutes that are on the record. Sam and Margot are now present, so we have almost everybody. Second, section 6, the regular meetings. We had discussed months ago maybe taking the task force to an every other month meeting. I don't know if that's something anybody's still interested in, or if that's just dead, or...
Well, actually, if you remember, we did take a vote on it, and it's been well over a year ago that we did the vote, and it was voted on and passed, but it had to go to the board of supervisors, or the rent board, one of the 2 boys, to be approved.
To take it to every other month, Dan?
Yes.
I don't remember taking the vote. I just remember kind of discussing it, but it not going anywhere. So
Yes.
I don't know if there's still any
So
interest in
it was
that.
approved, and I assumed that since we didn't meet last month and we met the month before, that this is what we're doing now.
Okay, so let me clarify that. No, the board was, since the board was in recess last month, we took a recess also. That's just a one-time thing. during the course of the year. I wasn't aware of this discussion you had before to do it every other month. The law says we meet monthly.
The law or the bylaws?
The law.
Oh, okay, well then, that's what it is.
Okay.
And I just wanted, Jordan Davis for the record, I just think that if we do meet like every other month, then that will, because there's so many issues that are unresolved, it just would cheat like a lot of issues there. It would just cheat a lot of people out of the ability to make sure these SROs are better places and that more we pursuing good policies. So it's just very would be very harmful. We should meet every month. That's something that should continue. It's not a big time commitment.
Okay. Any other comments on that? Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the bylaws?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bruce Burge again. On the voting, trying to wrap my head around this. We will have 13 members. A majority would be 7, and a majority of that would be 4. If we took a vote with a minimum amount of people present, 4 people could make policy for this board out of a potential 13. I think we need to keep it a majority of the entire board, not just 4 individuals who, you know, on a rare occasion may appear. I
Any other
think there's too little amount of people that can pass a policy.
I agree.
It is up to the group to decide which way they want to go. It's totally legal to do it either way. There are various boards that operate either way. Other comments?
And plus, because this is advisory board, we can't exactly make policy. So, whatever we do doesn't really have as much force of law. So I do support members present. Plus, we do have a lot of people who tend to be absent. We almost never have a full house. So we need to do a members present, and plus it's legal. So.
Other comments?
I mean, this is more Judy's area, but Jamie, did she comment on whether it's permissible to pick some intermediate number of people between members present and a majority of the full membership?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that one way or the other. I'm just trying to ascertain what the legal options are.
Yeah, given the status of our body, we can make those kind of rules.
So I have a comment. I actually feel that a majority for particularly matters that are very impactful, that I feel it's very important to have a majority. I think also if there's an opportunity to structure an agenda at a certain time where those major, I think everything's major, but it's just that we can actually make sure we have a majority to actually decide on things that we're going to make recommendations to.
Okay, so when you say majority, what do you mean? How many votes does that mean?
Well, I mean, I think Bruce's example makes practical sense to me.
Okay.
Majority of the board present
Majority of
and
the-
voting. Majority of the board, 13 members,
Okay.
and present.
So majority of the full membership.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be 7.
There you
Just
go.
to be clear. Okay. Are there any other issues in the bylaws that people see? It is a change, so I'm glad we are talking about it. Is there a motion to...
I'll make it.
Well, let's hear what the motion is first.
No, I'm not. Someone else has to make the motion. I don't make the motion.
Motion for what? I mean, Jordan's already made it, but
Motion to approve these bylaw changes.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay, should we have further discussion?
Yeah, if there's no second, we need to have further
Okay.
discussion or some
Okay, so
motion to close
so
the
it seems
voting.
like there's sort of two things on the table.
another motion.
There's the idea of adopting all these changes as they are, and then there are a couple of people that have singled out this Article 4, Section 1. So what if we had a discussion and possibly a vote or a motion on that, Article 4, Section 1?
Just
Yeah.
real, Larry Kessler, Health Department. I noticed that we still have HSH with 2 members on the board. Is that gonna change? Yeah, is that, so are we talking Scott Wilson? You're not Margaret?
I am Margot.
You're both?
It's only me. It's not Scott.
So is that, do we still have, is that 13 still, or is that 12?
I thought we had taken because we were representing DPH and HSA, and now we're HSH in Culver Housing.
I think the bylaws are suggesting that there would be 2 people from DHSH.
Okay, that's,
So I don't know
so
whether
I'm just seeing this now, yeah, there won't be. And what
It's
they're,
12 then. Right.
right.
Okay, so there's been a mystery about Scott Walton.
So the mystery, Mark Antonetti, HSH director. So we have restructured our department, as you know.
Uh-huh.
Housing, there's no longer a housing section in DPH, and there's no longer temporary supported housing insurance in HSA.
Mm-hmm.
While those existed, Wolfram Stuber was representing Housing and Urban Health, and Scott Walton was representing HSA.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the case anymore. We are all in the same department, and I oversee all of the housing programs.
Okay.
But Walton actually oversees shelters.
He oversees what?
Shelters, conditional
Uh-huh.
housing, this is not what he does.
So is Scott no longer wanting to serve here? Is that the?
No, I mean, he assumes it's me. That was
Ah.
the decision of our department was that.
We thought you were going to replace Wolfgang.
I'm replacing both of them. Because I actually
But you're
manage
only one, and
all-
they're 2.
I know, but, so what are you saying, that there needs to be a change from the board?
Well, we drafted this as if you were replacing Wolfgang and Scott was still with us.
Oh, I didn't know that wasn't clarified.
Yeah,
Oh,
we know because we never got any statement from Scott. So
So, Margot, once more.
Yeah.
So is there a reason why we can't amend this?
No, it just
We're
re-
discussing other articles.
yeah, it can be amended. I said that takes us down to 12. Okay, that means a quorum and majority is still 7 either way. Is there any objection to doing that? Having one fewer member?
Has Judy confirmed that that would be permissible under the existing ordinance? Does the ordinance speak to the composition?
Yeah, the ordinance, well, so we're also going to be amending, we're going to be renewing the ordinance. So we could include that in we could make that change in the ordinance. So,
But we probably shouldn't adopt until that change is made in the ordinance, we shouldn't adopt bylaws that I think conflict with the ordinance.
okay,
I mean, I think that's a concern. If the ordinance has to change in order to enable reducing
Okay.
membership to 1, then I think it would be premature to adopt the bylaws. Perhaps there's some other motion we could make, but I don't think we can adopt bylaws that are in conflict with the existing ordinance.
how about this? What if we adopt the rest of the bylaws? We leave that one in there until the ordinance gets changed. Then we can change that.
I mean, I think we'd have to say the ordinance, the effectiveness of the amendments would be deferred until then, because it's such a big change.
Okay. Yeah.
Sam Patel, so then the issue comes that it's a 12, so when it comes to voting, and if it's a tie, what happens? So we have to address that too.
It doesn't carry, the motion doesn't carry.
Right.
It can't carry on a tie.
There you go.
Clifford Gilmore, I wanted to make this comment that if we are going to amend the bylaws that have been proposed for the changes, that I'm wondering whether or not at this time could we table the item until the next meeting, until we further have time to have the amendment entered into the new document.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna toss this out there to keep the board at 13, that we add another private SRO operator. Oh, I'm sorry, George, does that upset you?
Well, there's only 2 tenant reps.
Well, and there's 4 SRO collaborative reps. How different is that? It would put a more even face on the board.
Other comments? Thank you.
I mean, I think any changes that people want to see in the bylaws, we should, to the extent that we can have those comments now, that would be good, even though a vote today would be premature, because then when we come back, we can make sure that the proposed amendments conform
Yeah, sure.
with the ordinance. So I would encourage people to bring up any other issues they have now.
Margot Antonetti, HSH. You know, I certainly didn't know that this would be a conversation. I totally read right over that because I assumed that it had been clarified that we're one department.
Yeah, nobody clarified that.
Yeah, so I apologize for that. But if we're discussing who is on the SRO task force, it seems like it's a really large conversation. And so I'm just concerned. I mean, just the exchange now shows that that would be a rather large conversation. And so I don't know that we would want to have this right now in this context. It might, because that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we can just add someone in order to have an uneven number. There are a lot of task forces and committees that have an even number. There's, it can't, and depending on the quorum, it might be an even number who is here. So that's not a way to manipulate the membership, I don't think.
All right. Yeah.
Hi, Jordan Davis. I have a clarifying question. So apparently we need 10 days notice for amendments of the bylaws. So this might be a question for Peter, but if do we have to do an up or down vote on the entirety of these bylaws, or can we amend them?
I think that if the proposals are out there 10 days in advance, if there then is going to be an amendment at the meeting that relates to one of the changes that's already being made, then I think that's okay. What I would have a problem with is if there's no change being proposed to a particular section and that comes up at the meeting, then I don't think there's been 10 days notice. So I think for anything here that's where the change has been proposed, that's fair game to sort of make a motion to say, well, let's adopt the proposed amendments, but let's change this one. What you couldn't do is say, take a section that has no proposal and add an amendment in without 10 days notice. I think that would be problematic.
Okay, so there are 3 things going on here. One is the bylaws as a whole, one is the section on voting, one is the section about membership. We're going to need to deal with this membership question pretty quickly because the next item on our agenda is about the ordinance. So if we want changes to that ordinance, like about the membership, today is the day to talk about it because we need to get that legislation introduced and go through the board process before the end of the year when the ordinance expires. So I'm not seeing any general consensus on adopting these bylaws today. So I'm just going to note that we've had a discussion about voting, Section 4, Article 4, Section 1, and about the membership. And I'm not. Are there any motions people want to make on the bylaws today?
Well, James, Bruce Bird, I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but I would make a motion that we add a third private SRO owner to the board to equalize
let's talk about that
representation.
under the ordinance. The next item, we'll talk about that
Oh,
in the
fair
next
enough.
item. Okay, Margot?
This is not a motion, it's just, throwing out another idea. So if there is a desire to, not have the task force go down by one member, but to keep it at the number. And this might have a history that I'm not aware of, but is there a particular reason why there is no representative from the master leasers here? I mean, I know there are owners here, but people that actually master lease,
Nonprofits are here.
right? So that you?
No, I'm not nonprofit.
That's me.
Oh,
Sure.
I'm sorry, I'm still getting used to who everybody is, okay. Is there, so that probably isn't enough? Okay,
Well, we don't master lease, we own the buildings.
So the ordinance calls for nonprofit property owner.
right,
Not, and the master leaser is different, so that is
right,
technically not part of the composition. The other
okay.
idea we had was to reach out to the rent board to see if they wanted to participate. But since we wanted to move forward with everything,
Okay.
we
Okay, I was
we
wrong, I
didn't go
thought
through
that-
that. Yeah, Rosemary had 3 other suggestions before, which we just don't have the leads and the follow-up to follow through with a couple of her other ideas. Yeah, Bruce.
So my question kind of remains, is it appropriate to make a motion at this point, or is it not appropriate?
I would say let's close the discussion of bylaws, move on to the ordinance, because that's where the composition of the task force is
Okay, fair enough.
decided. Are there any other comments on the bylaws? Okay, so we're going to table that, continue that to the call of the chair, as they say. Administrative announcements. So the ordinance, I didn't make copies of all the, did we make copies of that in the packet? No.
With the,
Yeah,
this?
of the ordinance.
Yeah.
That's the directory. So because we weren't changing the ordinance, really, the only thing we had changed was Margot's seat. And then we were going to just ask for it to be introduced. So the ordinance basically,
Do you have a copy of the ordinance? Andy?
yeah, I have one right here.
Okay. Maybe we gotta run copies.
Yeah. You want to make copies around here? Thanks. The ordinance basically just has the purpose of this group, the composition of it, how often we meet, and the when it expires. So Bruce has a suggestion to add another property owner. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay.
Is there a problem with
Discussion.
that,
So
Jordan?
let's stay calm, cool, and collected, and we will entertain comments on that motion. Deanna Martinez, do you have anything you want to add to this discussion?
Sure. I think that what we have now in terms of members is an appropriate balance. I think that in terms of city departments, what you want to do in terms of capacity, then you know best for that. But I think that our membership is great as it stands.
Okay. Other comments?
Yeah, I'll make one more comment. Eliminating the city positions, which I assume are nonpartisan. We have the nonprofit, and I'm not going to speak for Chirag, but I would go with more pro-tenant than pro-landlord on their position. 1 collaborative, 2 collaboratives, tenant reps, 3 collaboratives, 4 collaboratives. Second tenant rep, I get 6 members, possibly 7, who are probably pro-tenant, 4 that are neutral, and 2 that are pro-landlord. I think to add a third would just equalize the board a little more evenly and create an equality to the board on the issue of representation of tenant interests versus landlord interests.
Thank you for that comment. And before I call on Chirag, I just want to mention that none of the people here assigned these seats. This was all done by the Board of Supervisors. When we have a change of someone's department in a city employee changing, that's not really changing the spirit of what the board originally created. So to have a seat go from human service agency or health to homelessness, that is not a significant change in the spirit of what the board, of the law that the Board of Supervisors created. So I'm going to have Chirag and then Sam. Go ahead, Chirag.
Yeah, so we're actually fine with keeping it at 12. However, if we are to add a position, since the one that was taken away did come from the city, we would be in favor of someone from another city department being added onto the task force.
Okay. Sam?
So, Sam Patel, I've been here since the inception of this task force, actually, besides Rosemary leaving, I'm the oldest person serving. So the way about this whole task force came about, originally there were about 18 to 20 representatives on this. I think Marco was part of that, including the fire department, the police department. We had several, and the board at that time, there was only actually one tenant representative, and there was only, I believe, one or two for the collaboratives. So things have changed over the years, where tenant representatives have been added, collaborators have been added, especially like the families were added. There are, so, you know, it's not like this is written in stone and you can't change it. So if there is a recommendation that we need to add a third operator, a non-profit operator, the board is going to accept that. I don't think that's going to be an issue. We just have to make that recommendation.
Thank you. Other comments? Margo?
Margot, HSH, thank you for recalling our history.
Yes.
And the reason why I was 12. The reason why there was one SRO collaborate after the other added was because they were actually funded by the Board of Supervisors through an add back, kind of year after year after year. And so that's why it basically took 3 or 4 years for it. And, you know, I think it really does show the support of the Board of Supervisors to have that representation, to have those programs and to have that.
All right. Cliff?
Yeah, I really appreciate the history. I actually feel that diversity is a strength and an asset. And I actually feel that it's good to, you know, to come as close to having balance as possible. I think that's a really a good and effective way to hear different perspectives and different experiences.
Okay. Other comments? Yeah,
I
George.
just want to say if there was a third SRO operator, it wouldn't actually balance it because there's only 2 tenant representatives. And also, I want to think about, like, you know, city departments and their role. There are a couple boards and commissions in the city where where the board appointees are the only voting members, and the department people usually are usually ex officio. They're good they give color commentary, but they don't actually vote. And there's also, like, you know, issues of conflict of interest that can come up if people from city departments can vote on things, and I just would like clarity around that.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, and just one more comment. I agree with you completely, Jordan. There still won't be equity in the board. The board is still pro-tenant, even with the addition of a third private operator.
Peter, do you have something you wanted to add?
I mean, I would say that in terms of potential conflicts of interest, I mean, absent a charter restriction, you know, the Board of Supervisors can say that there should be city department members on the board. It's within their authority to do so, and, you know, to the extent that it, you know, may put people in an uncomfortable position, but it is lawful. I would note that I think that the current membership of the board, I mean, they're generally, Larry comes from an enforcement department, Jamie, you come from housing, which is also an enforcement department, Margot's from a department that administers. There's no department here, I think, that adjudicates disputes, so I don't think that currently there's a conflict issue. I think if we were to consider adding someone from the rent board, that could create a difficulty, and we'd have to consult the charter, see whether that's permissible, because they actually do adjudicate disputes, and you always want an adjudicator to be in a fair position.
Yeah, Sam.
So Sam can tell, actually, the rent board was one of the members of this task force originally.
Right, and it may be perhaps it is permissible, but that's the one that would perhaps give me pause, that we want to really check the law to make sure that that's okay.
Okay.
Maybe that's why they're not on there anymore. Because of what
They just decided they couldn't take the time out.
Okay, Diana, and then
They
Bruce.
just answered my question.
Oh, okay, Bruce.
And then, Margaret, you brought up the funding issue on the collaboratives. Who are they funded by now?
Because everything is funded by the budget and the mayor.
Right, but
So-
who pays the collaboratives? The
Oh,
actual
who are
city,
the
or is it
contracts?
some?
No, they're contracts with the
So
city.
does DBI pay anybody?
DBI pays the
DBI
collaborative.
is the contract, holding a contract for the city, being the representative of the city and holding a contract with a nonprofit or for-profit for that matter, is not a conflict of interest. That's doing our work.
Yeah, I didn't say it was, I was just
Yeah.
curious
Just
who pays the
clarifying.
collaboratives.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
when,
Yeah, no, it's no
we're an
problem.
advisory body, so, the conflict of interest is a different kind of term that people throw around in
Right.
when there's a real decision-making authority behind the body, typically. Okay. So, we've had a good discussion on composition, and the motion on the floor is to, I guess it's to replace the 13th seat with a property owner.
Right, I guess I would say the motion would have to be framed as it would be a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors.
This would be to make it, to recommend that the ordinance be changed to reflect a third property owner member. Because we are in discussions and trying to get this motion introduced, get this ordinance introduced, yeah.
Well, private property owner.
Okay, private property owner.
To make a distinction between the nonprofit property owners.
All those in favor? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 to 5.
Thank you.
All right. So, are there any other motions that people want to make?
So, Jamie, do we need to, I wonder if we might make a motion though with regard to HSA, because I don't know if the board is aware of that.
So,
To essentially
yeah.
reduce the membership to 12.
So this
from
would-
the existing ordinance.
So it would reduce it to 12? Okay. So, Margot's making a motion.
Yes, I'm making a motion to have one representative from the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing, which is the city agency that administers contracts with most of these SROs.
All right. So is there a second? All right.
All right, what was the motion again, to clarify?
Motion is to reduce our membership from 13 to 12 by eliminating the second seat that is held.
Thank you for clarifying.
Okay.
I will be supporting that motion.
Okay.
And just one
Yeah.
clarification, the motion is actually not about reducing the number. My motion is only to make the 2 into 1. The effect of it is that the number will be reduced, just for the record.
Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous. All right.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Chirag. All right, so we will put that in our recommendation to the board. Thank you. We also have been talking about the SRO directory. Right here. And I think our intent is going to be to every year ask people to go look and see if there's anything that needs to be updated in here. And Jordan submitted a few stuff I got here in an email. So why don't we start with these ones? There's a different address for Lion Martin and the Women's Community Clinic.
Could you do that line, please?
You have the directory?
Yeah, I had my own printout, but.
Page 9.
Page 9, okay. Oh, okay.
So we're going to change a couple of the addresses on here, and maybe we're going to Jordan, you would like to take out
Casa de las Madres and replace it with Women Inc.
Any objection to that?
It's for clarification. This is because I've talked to some people and they think Casa de las Madres is very problematic. Like people who've done a lot of work around domestic violence.
Well, I can just tell you, I've had a lot of friends who worked at Women Inc., and that's a great group. So,
yeah.
I don't have any problem making that change. Dan?
Why don't we just leave it the way it is and just add in Women's Inc.? This wasn't about taking things away, it was about adding to.
Okay. Okay. And then, so add Women Inc., this one. And then we're talking about conflict intervention service. That's another one that would be added to the same page, Jordan?
Yep.
Okay.
Conflict intervention service, that would be under...
But on page 13.
Another page. It's a resource that Diana, Martinez gave me, that referred to me. She says it's really good, and it's probably something that's really good for SRO tenants.
Thank you. This is Diana for the record. As a clarification, it would be tenant-to-tenant issues. So I don't know if it would go under landlord-tenant issues, but it's a service that mediates disputes between two tenants.
Between two tenants.
Particularly who live in nonprofit housing or Section 8 housing.
How long have they been around?
Pardon?
How long have they been around?
I don't know how long they've been around, but we've heard of the resource about a year ago. So they are going to do a presentation at our office next week, and I can ask them how long they've been around.
Yeah, could you get some more information on that?
Yeah, of
All right.
course. And I do have a PowerPoint with a lot of information about them if you'd like me to send it to you,
Yeah.
to the whole group.
Okay.
Which would be better? Just you two?
Does anybody else want to take a look at it? Interested? You can just send it to both. Okay.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just send it to the email. Thanks, yes. So anyway, I don't know where you would put it under. It's like mediation services.
Why don't we hold on to that one and get more information on that?
Okay.
And then Jordan, you have 3 other suggestions. One of them is about the SFAA, and I work really closely with them.
Oh, yeah, so...
Oh, yeah.
They're
okay,
part of
got
our
it.
program.
I got it.
I'll drop that amendment.
Okay. And then Homeless Advocacy Project, is that
think
under the
that's-
same resource page or different?
I think it's under legal resources.
That's page 15?
Yeah.
They're great, they're a good group. I don't have objection to that. I used to work with them years ago. There was a guy named Steve Bingham. Steve Bingham didn't work at HAP, he worked at Bela, but he represented the Black Panthers in the 60s and got in trouble and had to leave the country. He had lived in France for like 15 years, and then he was finally allowed to come back, and then he practiced for many years in the Tenderloin and worked with the Homeless Advocacy Project. They get a lot of law students from Hastings, so they're a good group. So we want to add them to legal services. And then, the Navigation Center over here, around the corner, are they listed? Yeah, page 17.
The one on 1950.
how much longer is that going to be open?
So, yeah, that's going to be closed like any moment
Yeah.
practically.
We're
Yeah,
actually
you know,
building
right?
affordable housing there, so.
Yeah. So,
So it's your fault, Sharon.
Yeah.
Okay, we take that one out.
Which
Navigation.
one? Okay.
Margot.
Yeah.
I have, I don't know if this is somewhere else, but, you know, we are adding navigation centers, like,
Yep.
you know, and then we also have some short term, this one is running out. Would it make sense to put information of the Department on Homelessness and Supportive Housing here?
We have
It is on page,
yeah, we have that.
The navigation
I am so
center.
sorry.
Put your number and name there.
No, I will not. But we should, but, oh, no, you have everything.
You need a
That's
direct
great.
extension
Thank
to
you, you got
Margot.
it. You got it.
Home address?
Yeah, cell phone. Thank you.
Other suggestions, Larry?
Yeah, I noticed I was helping somebody that came into our office. I believe the Eviction Defense Collaborative address is different.
What page?
It's on Mission Street now, 1338 Mission.
That's page 13?
Page 14.
14? EDC moved, yeah. Let's look up that one and get the right address in there.
This one?
Yeah.
Margot.
Yeah.
HSH. I actually have wanted to ask one additional question. MoCD funds a lot of eviction prevention services, and they're on their website. And so I wonder if the website for MoCD, if that link should be added, because there are always changes of what gets funded and what gets.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Addiction services.
Hmm?
Addiction defense services.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Eviction
also
prevention,
like
yeah.
cancer.
Addiction prevention.
We also
Yes.
include like.
Eviction
health
prevention?
there too.
So we can get to the
MOHCD.
link.
HCD.
And if you
Look
click
that
through,
up.
you will actually get to the link.
Okay.
Okay. Edit over here.
Yep. All right, excellent.
I have one.
Oh, yeah.
For the record. On page 13, under landlord tenant issues, so I don't necessarily want to split hairs on this, but if you look where we, our affiliation with the housing things, we're listed as the contact under this issues and landlord dispute. However, it's going to get routed to the collaborative office, so I was wondering whether or not that could be changed.
So the page that we have here set up is for COP, Code Enforcement Outreach Program.
And COP is actually located in the same office as the collaborative.
Oh, should we change the address?
Change the address.
Okay.
Yeah.
48 Turk.
Turk.
Thank you. All right.
Phone number 2.
In the
I think they,
number.
yeah, well,
Working.
yeah.
Yeah, we gotta change that too.
So you want the phone number for the Turk, do you have that?
Yeah, this number is 88532
That's CC's main office, so
Yeah.
the number for COP would be
77
415-775-71.
7110. Okay. And then, of course, on this page 2, we got to change Wolfgang to Margot. All right. Thank you. All right, moving right along. Hotel visitor policy. Yeah, Peter.
So Peter Keith, legal advisor, just so I could recap for our two members who got in after we went over the minutes. Last month's vote required an 8-vote majority under the existing bylaws. The motion required 8 votes to carry, only got 6. So the amendment that seemed to have been approved at the last meeting was in fact didn't carry because we didn't have sufficient votes, or the motion didn't carry.
Okay, so,
And, actually, are we gonna like motion to pass the going back to item 5? Are we gonna motion to pass this out because or motion to like actually update the directory? Just clarifying.
we're updating it.
All right.
So, it's just part of our normal process, so we're gonna make all these changes. But I would like to move along to the next item.
All right. Yeah.
So, is there any comments regarding last meeting's discussion on escorting the tenant, the guest out, who did not leave their ID at the desk?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Dan Jordan for the record. I have done a lot of questioning of tenants as they come into the office. I also work with the Central City SRO Collaborative.
Okay.
And 90% of them are under contract, which supersedes the
Okay.
visitor policy. And most of, maybe not all, but most of the private or the nonprofit hotels are not going to change their policy for tenants not, guests not to be escorted out because of the fact that a lot of tenants left on, or visitors left on their own don't go out of the building. They wander around the building. Therefore, instead of shaking your head no, let me talk, please and thank you.
Let's keep it calm, cool, and collected. Dan, wrap it up, and then we'll go over to Cliff, please. Thank you.
As I was saying, the residents therefore are getting write-up after write-up after write-up. After so many write-ups, then they're subject to eviction. We're not about getting people evicted because of a guest that doesn't leave. The guest needs to be escorted out. A person should be able to take the 2 minutes to escort the visitor out.
Okay. Cliff is next.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Clifford for the record. So, Jordan, I know you championed this item, and a couple questions for you. In bringing this to this body, I'm curious as to what kind of outreach you did with this, if you could share what kind of outreach you did and with whom.
With the Mission SRO Collaborative, I had discussions with the tenant leaders there. There was a lot of support for this. And there's also a lot of people are concerned because there's a lot of working people in SROs and they may not be able to necessarily escort their guests out. Now, if you're actually working, then then you probably, if you're working and living in an SRO, you're usually working long hours with long and unpredictable hours. So it's just treating us like adults, and like there are also a lot of immigrants in the mission.
Yeah,
so
I was
that
just
could
curious
be
as to what outreach you did that helped. So I wanted to just say that also, unfortunately, I wasn't here for the July meeting beyond my circumstances to be here. But upon my return, I actually also did outreach, and we have a leadership table of 35 tenants through the leadership program. I also went out to some other nonprofit operators and met with a number of supported housing managers to sort of gauge, you know, what the experiences have been and how people felt about this. And there's some 35 leaders at the collaborative, and most of them have lived in their SRO hotel for well over 10 years. Not one wanted to change the policy. They felt that it was working for them when they have guests, family come over, that it actually is effective, it works. And from the manager's perspective, beyond what Dan just shared, there was a manager who said to me, there was on one occasion that in fact a overnight guest destroyed a 60-inch flat screen TV in the building, which had to be replaced, but other acts of vandalism. Also, they shared that in an emergency, if that guest, if they don't know that they're in the building or not, then they actually have to leave their office and go and try and find that person in the building. So I think in my conclusion, I certainly understand about supporting tenants, I get that. But for me, I do not want to see tenants who are housed be subjected to lease violations because of no fault of their own. And managers have told me in instances like that, who gets written up, it is the tenant who's written up, and every tenant who has a lease, that signs a lease with THC, in their lease it says they are responsible at all times for their tenant, for their guests.
All right, Bruce?
Question for Dan, I'm not really sure the answer. Are you telling me that the nonprofits that master lease properties are not obligated to follow the visitor rules? I mean, if they change, they can just ignore the change?
It's my understanding that a contract supersedes the visitor policy.
So written into the lease, okay, perfect.
Margo?
And Margot, HSH, and maybe Peter can clarify as well. So from what I understand, it is correct that if it's public money that's funding a program, that therefore it is not obligated in terms of the rent board to follow all of that, but all the SROs do. So, and that's a best practice to do that. That doesn't mean, this might, I mean, I'm not here for THC or Conrad or whatever. I think would be what you've been talking about, Clifford. I'm sure would be huge concerns for other master lease providers as well. But the best practice has been to go with the SRO, what do you call it, visitor policy.
Sam and then Diana.
Sam Patel, so I agree with Margot on that the nonprofits are exempt from following any of the rent code, including evictions. They can evict somebody without going through the whole process. I myself actually agree with, I operate two nonprofits. I manage two nonprofit master lease buildings, and I'm a private operator. So I have two different perspectives. And all my managers have the same thing. It's like, for security purposes, we need to make sure that whoever goes in is not wandering around the building, needs to be escorted back out. I mean, I actually was part of this visitor policy, and after a long discussion with including the rent board, we agreed that this is the best practice. And now coming in and saying, oh, well, we need to change it after all these years is, to me, it doesn't make sense.
Diana Martinez.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure I understand. So, non-profits, because they're funded by public money, don't necessarily have to follow the rent ordinance, the visitor policy, although they probably do. But private SROs, because they're not funded by public money, do have to follow the visitor policy. They can't put it into the lease, new visitor rules.
So Margot, HSH, I'm not a lawyer, so, and I don't have the whole policy in front of me. But the SRO visitor policy was written for the SROs. And so there is the part that because publicly funded, these SROs that we master lease would not have to follow these rules, but they do. So, I mean, that is, if they weren't doing it, then we would want to hear about that. We would be concerned. As a city contractor, we would be concerned. It's been, it's been best practices
Well, maybe you would know, Sam, about the private realm. Can a lease add any rules to visitors or no?
So the way
You've been doing it.
So the way the rent board works, this is the bare minimum where a visitor policy. So if you add to it, let's say instead of 8 overnights, you want to change the policy to 10 overnights, that you can do. But if you want to reduce it, or if you want to change that policy, you have to go to the rent board, make a case to them and say, look, we want to change this policy, and let them know. So they can then give you a decision. And that could be on property by property basis.
Well, for Spurge, it is a property by property. If Sam goes and gets some different restriction on one of his property, I can't say, oh, well, Sam has it. I'm gonna do it here. I have to go to the rent board and get their blessing as well.
Okay, for sure.
So this visitor policy was dealt over several years, and we went through this on every line item by line item. So, coming in and just saying, oh, well, let's just change certain things. I mean, everything was thought through on this thing, including at this board, or
Okay.
this task force.
Peter?
So I know there's been lots of requests, Peter Keith, legal advisor, I know there's been some references to what the law is and what it may require. This is not an area I practice in. I can't offer an answer at this meeting. If this is an issue people would like me to look into, I can certainly render an opinion next meeting. I mean, I don't know how pertinent that opinion is to the discussion. I just wanted to clarify. I don't have the answers as I sit here.
Thank you. Other comments? Dan, Jordan?
Dan Jordan, tenant rep. To give a good example, some years ago, there was a hotel on 6th Street. It had a manager that would take the locks off the doors for the outside and just allow anybody and everybody to walk in. In the middle of the night, you got people kicking in your door. You can't go out to use the toilet without getting mugged in the hallway.
Thank you, Dan.
I know about this because it was my hotel.
Yeah. Other comments? Okay. So do people have other aspects of the hotel visitor policy that they wish to talk about or raise at today's meeting? Yeah.
I did want to bring up this Bay Area Reporter article that I had attached. This is the Ellis Hotel, and I'm sure Central City will want to say something about this.
Comment, that's fine, in my opinion.
So,
if she's gonna bring this up, I mean, it's current litigation, nobody knows anything about it.
it's not about the particular hotel. I think she told me coming up to the meeting today that there's a visitor policy aspect to this, not about this hotel, but about visitor policy.
Visitor policy violation, I don't know that there is, but that's for litigation, it's not.
It's not specific to this hotel, so just bear with me for 1 second. Thank you. Go ahead.
And couple of the issues that came up included charging caretakers daily fees, charging them to use the showers, and also not allowing guests of tenants to use the bathing facilities. Now, I don't want them taking long showers, but a guest could potentially stay for 8 nights, and if they're not allowed to use the shower, then they're going to come out stinking.
So, yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in the visitor policy that prevents somebody from taking a shower, and certainly if somebody stays overnight, I think that's almost implicit. But we don't open up our properties for visitors to come in and do their bathing. I mean, that's just insane.
Hold on. Okay.
And,
Thank you.
I appreciate that Jordan doesn't want long showers, so maybe we could put something in the visitor policy to limit it to 6 minutes.
So, we've been at it a while this morning. Everyone's been doing really well. Could you maybe be a little more concise about what you're getting at here, Jordan? Thanks.
The thing is, there have been hotels that not allowed visitors to guest of tenants to use the bathing facilities even if they're overnight for multiple days.
Yeah, Bruce.
Well, I would suppose then that's a violation. You go to the rent board to get it enforced. I mean, there's nothing that, I don't, you know, charging caregivers a fee, we know that's illegal.
Okay.
If
So
somebody's doing that, it
so-
should be brought to
so
somebody's attention.
So what we're talking about here, Jordan, is that the visitor policy has rules in it, and that if someone is violating rules, if the hotel is violating rules, then the rent board has to be brought in to enforce the rule. So rather than creating a new blanket rule, Bruce's point is that it's already covered by the existing rules. They're not allowed to do that, and that every time anybody here hears of somebody doing that, it needs to be brought, the rent board needs to come in to enforce it rather than having a new policy change.
I don't. I
Is that,
feel.
is that fair?
It's in the policy.
Okay.
And, you know, make a report with the police department or with the rent board. It's there. I mean, you get.
It's covered.
Get one-
What they're saying is it's covered.
It's
That
covered.
that's what I kind of thought,
Okay.
and about the caregiver portion, but the other portion is the
Taking a shower.
right of guests to use the guest of tenants to use the bathing facilities.
Again, I think that's covered under the existing rules.
Actually, that's up to the hotel.
Oh,
It's
so
not
it's not
in
covered.
the visitor policy. It's up to the hotel. They're paying the water bill, the gas bill.
Okay. Margot?
Margot, HSH. I am aware of the time. I'm also aware of what we had discussed last time we met. And we weren't discussing anything about using facilities.
No, this is a new point under the same.
Right, so I'm just pointing out that we started with one thing and these are really two different
Yeah,
things.
no,
And
that's
I think we
understood.
you know, just pointing it out.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion? Okay, well, perhaps, Peter, is there a way that for the next meeting we could figure out if if a hotel can set a rule that bars guests from using the shower?
I can look into the question. I'm not sure whether I can render a public opinion on it. I will certainly look into it, and I'll consult with whether that's something that's suited for public opinion or something that has to be delivered in some kind of a closed session.
Well, maybe Robert Collins would know.
Yeah.
Right off
No,
the-
and I'm saying if it's a cut and dried issue, I think it's something I'd be comfortable
Okay.
speaking to publicly, but I can certainly look. into
How does that sound, Jordan? We ask legal counsel to check, see if it's covered or not by the existing rule, and then we bring it back to.
And again, what's the exact question, Jamie?
Is it, can a hotel charge extra or bar a guest from using the shower? A guest of a permanent tenant. Bruce?
So next, are we gonna ask questions about whether or not guests can use community kitchens, leave their garbage in the garbage chutes, use a washer dryer? There seems to be a lot of legislation that we could submit for the visitor rules.
Well, we do have an example of a violation here, and we're just asking for legal clarification.
And I think that's if you read the anonymous comment by a guy who's not so anonymous, he says this is all nonsense.
Okay.
Part of the article.
Sam?
So this, I'm still don't understand. I mean, this is an isolated incident, it seems like. Is there any other, is this like prevalent throughout the system or
That's a good.
something? I mean,
No, that's a good question. Did people heard about this at other hotels? I haven't.
Right. I mean, the DBI would get complaints about certain things. I mean, has anybody gotten these kind of complaints? I mean, one isolated, which is actually in the lawsuit, and we're trying to make policy changes in terms of based on this.
Good point. It's a good point. Dan?
I've actually gotten quite a few complaints about the Alice Hotel and this Kelly / Susie / et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
And none of them good.
Okay. Diana?
I actually do, I think you bring up a good point about, like, maybe we should explore, should guests be allowed to use the kitchens or not? Because there are you know, when your guest comes, if they are an overnight guest, they may want to use those facilities. They may want to use the shower, they may want to use the kitchen. And whether or not a landlord restricts it or not isn't really, or is allowed to restrict it or not, isn't really written down. So maybe that is something to consider if we want to do that for showers.
I think you guys are making way too much out of this, so then we legislate you have to take your shoes off before you go into the unit. I mean, come on.
No, but
We're all
just
adults here.
whether or not a landlord can restrict that or not.
We're all adults here.
Peter?
I mean, I could advise, I mean, our office can't advise on sort of general landlord-tenant relation issues. What we can advise is on whether a specific city policy relating to SROs governs this, but on the larger background of landlord-tenant law, we can't, that's not something we can advise on.
Okay.
We should legislate that visitors can't smoke in our buildings. That's totally unhealthy and bad for everybody.
I think that's a fair thing to.
So we
if-
should put it in the visitor policy.
If you don't want people to smoke in your buildings, I mean, smoking in the buildings is a fire hazard.
Well, yeah, not to mention a health hazard, so we should put that in the visitor policy too, no smoking of guests.
Something to think about.
First of all, the rent board is the one who's gonna be making this policy changes. We're spending way too much time on this thing right now.
Just recommending.
Yeah.
I would support no smoking policies. I hate tobacco. I've never smoked tobacco. Maybe other things, but not tobacco. So for the first time, I might actually agree with Bruce here.
All right. Any other comments? All right, let's wrap up item 6 then. Reports from the SRO collaboratives. So we have Cliff here and we have Deanna. Any?
Essentially, collaborative, no report at this time.
Okay.
Thank you. We, at the Mission SRO Collaborative, we are having our graduation for our leadership program, the Tenants Are Rising program, and that will be next week.
All right. Thank you. Item 8. Anyone have a topic for next time?
Clifford, for the record, I don't know about the next meeting, but at a future meeting, some clarification, I think, around companion animals and service animals. Specifically around certain breeds that have been deemed, potential breeds that can actually, can attack this revolt. And so I just want some clarification around, I think it'd be helpful to have some clarification about that. As well as also, I know that there is a process that people have to go through in terms of they have to have their animals, they have to have shots and things of that nature. And I know that in some THC buildings, that's not the case. And I'm certainly I think an operator's responsibility to make sure that's in place, but sometimes people use companion animals and service animals, and they really sort of that's interchangeable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other topics?
And
Yeah.
I do have a couple. I'll reiterate the right to pay rent by check thing. That's an issue in the THC. They won't let us pay by check, so I really think like rent payment methods in these nonprofits should be discussed. A couple nonprofits allow to pay by check, a couple allow not to have a payee, but that's something for a future meeting. And also we had a discussion on immigration a couple months ago, a specific issue that's come up within MISROC, and I'm still having discussions with stakeholders about this, and we're all discussing this, is the issue of like ICE getting into SROs, and now they're a federal agency, but you don't have to let them in if they don't have a judicial warrant. So that's something for for a future meeting, because it's become such a hot topic in the Mission, I'm sure, and other immigrants communities as well.
Okay. Do you have any other items?
Nah.
Okay. Anybody else?
Margot, I just want to make a request when we have the discussion about the topic that Clifford just suggested. There's a lot that's written around that, and so that we make sure in terms of ADA and service animals versus companion animals. Just want to make sure that we maybe have that knowledge at the table, just so that we don't, start discussing things that are actually the law already anyway, or guess at.
Okay.
things. So logic doesn't always hold what the law is.
Okay.
Sorry.
I second that.
Sorry, sir.
But Diana Martinez, you left me a voicemail, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to call you back.
I did have a question about the rules of this body around endorsing ballot measures. Is there anything that restricts that, or
I think we've
is
done
that
it before.
something we're allowed to do?
I can look into that.
Okay.
Answer
We,
that.
we did that around something in June.
Well, yeah, that's why I wondered if it was an issue, or any recommendations. I know the hotel conversion ordinance was something that came up a couple years ago, and I don't know if that's something
But that was legislation, that wasn't a ballot measure.
Oh, okay. And is it with legislation, is this
Yeah, with
board
legislation.
allowed to
Yeah.
endorse something?
Yeah, with
Okay,
legislation.
but for ballot measures, it might be different.
Oh, I can.
We'll
look
double
into
check.
that and report back.
I think we've done it before, but Peter, we
Oh,
need to
yeah.
get the
That'd be
the
good
word.
to know too, like if there's been precedent set.
Okay. What else, Dan?
Well, concerning, like with the visitor policy and the escorting of guests, maybe we should invite a couple of people to come in and speak about it from both nonprofit and private hotels, one from each.
Okay. Jordan?
I'm not gonna say anything. I just hoping we can talk about a few other things as well.
At the next meeting?
Yeah, just want to close this discussion right now.
Okay. I think that's fine, but if people have, if you have something in mind that you want to bring up next time, this is a good time to talk about it.
All right, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you, everybody. Any other public comment? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Again, all those in favor? All right, thank you for all staying cool, calm, and collected.
Except you.